Hi guys. Well, we are into week 3 of our Hosea series. Um, just to uh, frame the book, first 3 chapters, it's the story of Hosea's marriage to Gomer. That frames the book. It's about Israel and their marriage to God, uh, Hosea's marriage to Gomer, her infidelity, Israel's sin, Israel walking away to idol worship, and the impact on that relationship. Gratefully, it ends with the promise that God will buy Israel back. They will be exiled, but He will retain a remnant and He will restore them to Him ultimately, in the same way that Hosea buys back Gomer. So that's the first 3 chapters of the book. Chapter 4 that we did last week starts to lay out the case against Israel. How has Israel been unfaithful to God? What has that infidelity looked like? Chapter 5, which is where we are this week, and the first bit of chapter 6, looks at, well, what is the impact of that sin? What is the impact of Israel's infidelity, their sin, their idol worship? What does that do to their relationship with God? Now, gratefully, when we read passages about this, we have the luxury and the privilege of knowing that we live in an era after Jesus has already dealt with the problem. And so it's not the case for people who would have heard Hosea reading out these scriptures, but it is for us. And so I think the challenge for us is that we get to enjoy God's grace, and we don't necessarily need to know how it works or why it was necessary even. But that obviously leaves us with a pretty shallow appreciation for God's grace, and it doesn't really equip us very well to be able to answer questions like, well, why was Jesus even necessary? Why did Jesus need to die for us? So I was thinking about an analogy, and if you walk outside at night, you can look up at the stars and you can enjoy them and you can appreciate them to some extent. You can think, well, it's quite nice, it's twinkly, it's a great setting for my outdoor barbecue, and so you don't really need to know how space works to enjoy the night sky. But then a couple of years ago, there was quite a well-known session by a pastor called Louis Giglio, called Indescribable, and he spent about 45 minutes unpacking just how incredible space is. He was doing it to show the sort of fingerprints of God in creation, but you could probably, in some sense, have the same experience, just looking at the NASA website and looking at all the photos. So it's not the fact that his thing was with a sort of Christian emphasis, but what he did is unpack how extraordinary and how vast and how massive and how beautiful the universe is. And so in that session, there were a couple of moments thinking like, wow, like really struck with an awe for the universe and an awe for space, because I understood more about it. And I was thinking it's the same for us now. Knowing what Christ has done, we can simply enjoy the fact that if we know Christ, we get to go to heaven, and we can feel comforted by that, and that we don't need to understand how bad sin is. But if we do understand why sin is a problem, we obviously have a much deeper grasp of how incredible God's grace is. And I think it also puts us in a much stronger position to answer people's questions about grace and about Jesus and about God. And so we don't want to shy away from passages like this chapter 5, which feel pretty uncomfortable, when God describes himself as dry rot or a moth or a young lion tearing at Israel. But that is the reality of sin, and that is what we have been saved from. So this week is another under the hood look at this our relationship with God, always in the light of Christ, but helpful to understand, why grace is incredible and why Jesus was so necessary. So Kath and I are traveling back from Adelaide on Thursday evening. I don't think we'll be on the call, but Nathan will lead the session. I trust it'll be a great conversation, and can be interested to hear if there are anything's coming out of that on the weekend. But look forward to seeing everyone again, and I just trust it'll be a good week, and that this will be edifying and a great foundational discussion for everyone. Cheers.